Chapter 21 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 21 The Kiss of Love. Presently there was a sound of music, and accompanied by certain artists, my pages entered, bearing with them the apparel more gorgeous than any I had worn hitherto. First, these pages having stripped me of my robes, the artist painted all my body in hideous designs of red and white and blue, till I resembled a flag, not even sparing my face and lips, which they coloured with carmine hues. Over my heart also they drew a scarlet ring with much care and measurement. Then they did up my hair that now hung upon my shoulders after the fashion in which it was worn by generals among the Indians, tying it on the top of my head with an embroidered ribbon red in colour, and placed a plume of cock's feathers above it. Next, having arrayed my body in gorgeous vestments, not unlike those used by popish priests at the celebration of the Mass, they set golden earrings in my ears, golden bracelets on my wrists and ankles, and round my neck a collar of priceless emeralds. On my breast also they hung a great gem that gleamed like moonlit water, and beneath my chin a false beard made of pink seashells. Then having twined me round with wreaths of flowers till I thought of the maypole at Bungay Common, they rested from their labours, filled with admiration at their handiwork. Now the music sounded again, and they gave me 2 lutes, one of which I must hold in either hand, and conducted me to the great hall of the palace. Here a number of people of rank were gathered, all dressed in festal attire, and here also on a dais to which I was led stood my 4 wives, clad in their rich dresses of the 4 goddesses, Xochi, Shiloh, Atlar, and Clishto, after whom they were named for the days of their wifehood, Atlar being the Princess Otomy. When I had taken my place upon the dais, my wives came forward one by one, and kissing me on my brow, offered me sweetmeats and meal cakes in golden platters, and cocoa and mescal in golden cups. Of the mescal I drank, for it is a spirit that I needed inward comfort, but the other dainties I could not touch. These ceremonies being finished, there was silence for a while, till presently a band of filthy priests entered at the far end of the chamber, clad in their scarlet sacrificial robes. Blood was on them everywhere, their long locks were matted with it, their hands were red with it, even their fierce eyes seemed full of it. They advanced up the chamber till they stood before the dais. Then suddenly the head priest lifted up his hands, crying out aloud, "Adore the immortal God, ye people!" And all those gathered there prostrated themselves, shouting, "We adore the God!" Thrice the priest cried aloud, and thrice they answered him thus, prostrating themselves at every answer. Then they rose again, and the priest addressed me, saying, "Forgive us, O Tezcat, that we cannot honour you as it is meet, for our sovereign should have been here to worship you with us. But you know, O Tezcat, how sore is the strait of your servants, who must wage war in their own city against those who blaspheme you and your brother gods. You know that our beloved emperor lies wounded, a prisoner in their unholy hands. When we have gratified your longing to pass beyond the skies, O Tezcat, and when in your earthly person you have taught us the lesson that human prosperity is but a shadow which flees away, in memory of our love for you, intercede with us, we beseech you that we may smite these wicked ones and honour you and them by the right of their own sacrifice. O Tezcat, you have dwelt with us but a little while, and now you will not suffer that we hold you longer from your glory, for your eyes have longed to see this happy day, and it has come at last. We have loved you, Tezcat, and ministered to you. Grant in return that we may see in your splendour, we who are your little children, and till we come, watch well over our earthly welfare, and that of the people among whom ye have deigned to sojourn. Having spoken some such words as these, that at times could scarcely be heard because of the sobbing of the people, and of my wives who wept loudly, except Otomy alone, this villainous priest made a sign, and once more the music sounded. Then he and his band placed themselves about me, my wives, the goddesses, going before and after, and led me down the hall and on to the gateways of the palace, which were thrown wide for us to pass. Looking round me with a stony wonder, for in this my last hour nothing seemed to escape my notice, I saw that a strange play was being played about us. Some hundreds of paces away, the attack on the palace of Asher, where the Spaniards were entrenched, raged with fury. Bands of warriors were attempting to scale the walls, and being driven back by the deadly fires of the Spaniards and the pikes and the clubs of their Tlascalan allies, while from the roofs of such of the neighbouring houses as remained unburned, and more especially from the platform of the great teocalli, on which I must presently give up the ghost, arrows and javelins and stones were poured by thousands into the courtyard and outer works of the Spanish quarters. 500 yards away also raged this struggle to the death, but about me, around the gates of Montezuma's palace on the hither side of the square, was a different scene. Here were gathered a vast crowd, among them many women and children, waiting to see me die. They came with flowers in their hand, with the sound of music and joyous cries, and when they saw me, they set up such a shout of welcome that it almost drowned the thunder of the guns and the angry roar of battle. Now and again an ill-aimed cannonball would plough through them, killing some and wounding others, but the rest took no heed, only crying more, "Welcome, Tezcat, and farewell! Blessings on you, our deliverer! Welcome and farewell!" We went slowly through the press, treading on a path of flowers, till we came across the courtyard to the base of the pyramid. Here at the outer gate there was a halt because of the multitude of the people, and while we waited a warrior thrust his way through the crowd and bowed before me. Glancing up, I saw that it was Guatemoc. "Teule," he whispered to me, "I leave my charge yonder," and he nodded towards the force who strove to break a way into the palace of Asher, "to bid you farewell. Doubtless we shall meet again ere long. Oh, believe me, Teule, I would have helped you if I could, but it cannot be. I wish that I might change places with you. My friend, farewell. Twice you have saved my life, but yours I cannot save." "Farewell, Guatemoc," I answered. "Heaven prosper you, for you are a true man." Then we passed on. At the foot of the pyramid the procession was formed, and here one of my wives bade me adieu, after weeping on my neck, though I did not weep on hers. Now the road to the summit of the teocalli winds round and round the pyramid, ever mounting higher as it winds, and along this road we went in solemn state. At each turn we halted, and another wife bade me a last good-bye, or one of my instruments of music, which I did not grieve to see the last of, or some article of my strange attire, was taken from me. At length, after an hour's march, for our progress was slow, we reached the flat top of the pyramid that is approached by the great stair, a space larger than the area of a churchyard here at Ditchingham, and unfenced at its lofty edge. Here on this dizzy place stood the temples of Huitzel and of Tezcat, soaring structures of stone and wood, within which were placed the horrid effigies of the gods, and dreadful chambers stained with sacrifice. Here, too, were the holy fires that burned eternally, the sacrificial stones, the implements of torment, and the huge drum of snakeskin. But for the rest, the spot was bare. It was bare, but not empty, for on that side of it which looked towards the Spanish quarters were stationed some hundreds of men who hurled missiles into the camp without ceasing. On the other side also were gathered a concourse of priests awaiting the ceremony of my death. Below, the great square, fringed round with burnt-out houses, was crowded with thousands of people, some of them engaged in combat with the Spaniards, but the larger part collected there to witness my murder. Now we reached the top of the pyramid 2 hours before midday, for there were still many rites to be carried out ere the moment of sacrifice. First I was led into the sanctuary of Tezcat, the god whose name I bore. Here was his statue, or idol, fashioned in black marble and covered with golden ornaments. In the hand of his idol was a shield of burnished gold on which its jewelled eyes were fixed, reading there, as his priests fabled, all that passed upon the earth he had created. Before him also was the plate of gold, which, with muttered invocations, the head priest cleansed as I watched, rubbing it with his long and matted locks. This done, he held it to my lips that I might breathe on it, and I turned faint and sick, for I knew that it was being made ready to receive the heart which I felt beating in my breast. Now what further ceremonies were to be carried out in this holy place I do not know, for at that moment a great tumult arose in the square beneath, and I was hurried from the sanctuary by the priests. Then I perceived this. Galled to madness by the storm of missiles rained upon them from the crest, the Spaniards were attacking the teocalli. Already they were pouring across the courtyards in large numbers, led by Cortes himself, and with them came many hundreds of their allies, the Tlascalans. On the other hand, some thousands of the Aztecs were rushing to the foot of the first stairway to give the white men battle there. 5 minutes passed, and the fight grew fierce. Again and again, covered by the fire of the arquebusiers, the Spaniards charged the Aztecs, but their horses slipping upon the stone pavement. At length they dismounted and continued the fray on foot. Slowly and with great slaughter the Indians were pushed back, and the Spaniards gained a footing on the first stairway. But hundreds of warriors still crowded the lofty winding road, and hundreds more held to the top, and it was plain that if the Spaniards won through at all, the task would be a hard one. Still a fierce hope smote me like a blow when I saw what was towards. If the Spaniards took the temple there would be no sacrifice. No sacrifice could be offered till midday, so Otomie had told me, and that was not for hard upon 2 hours. It came to this then: if the Spaniards were victorious within 2 hours, there was chance of life for me. If not, I must die. Now when I was led out of the sanctuary of Tezcat, I wondered because the Princess Otomi, or rather the goddess Atla, as she was then called, was standing among the chief priests and disputing with them, for I had seen her bow her head at the door of the holy place, and thought that it was in token of farewell, seeing that she was the last of the 4 women to leave. Of what she disputed I could not hear because of the din of battle, but the argument was keen, and it seemed to me that the priest was somewhat dismayed at her words, and yet had a fierce joy in them. It appeared also that she won her cause, for presently she bowed in obeisance to her, and turning slowly, she swept to my side with a peculiar majesty of gait that even I noted. Glancing up at her face also, I saw that it was alight, as though with a great and holy purpose, and moreover that she looked like some happy bride passing to her husband's arms. "Why are you not gone, Otomi?" I said. "Now it is too late. The Spaniards surround the teocalli, and you will be killed or taken prisoner." "I await the end, whatever it may be," she answered briefly, and we spoke no more for a while, but watched the progress of the fray, which was fierce indeed. Grimly the Aztec warriors fought before the symbols of their gods, and in the sight of the vast concourse of the people who crowded the square beneath and stared at the struggle in silence. They hurled themselves upon the Spanish swords, they gripped the Spaniards with their hands, and screaming with rage, dragged them to the steep sides of the roadway, purposing to cast them over. Sometimes they succeeded, and a ball of men clinging together would roll down the slope and be dashed to pieces on the stone flooring of the courtyard, a Spaniard being the centre of the ball. But do what they would, like some vast and writhing snake, still the long array of Teules, clad in their glittering mail, ploughed its way upward through the storm of spears and arrows. Minute by minute and step by step they crept on, fighting as men fight who know the fate that awaits the desecrators of the gods of Anahuac, fighting for life and honour and safety from the stone of sacrifice. Thus an hour went by, and the Spaniards were halfway up the pyramid. Louder and louder grew the fearful sounds of battle. The Spaniards cheered and called upon their patron saints to aid them. The Aztecs yelled like wild beasts. The priests screamed their invocations to the gods and cries of encouragement to the warriors, while above all rose the rattle of the arquebuses, the roar of the cannon, and the fearful note of the great drum of snakeskin, on which a half-naked priest beat madly. Only the multitudes below never moved, nor shouted. They stood silent, gazing upward, and I could see the sunlight flash on the thousands of their staring eyes. Now all this while I was standing near the stone of sacrifice with Otomi at my side. Round me were a string of priests, and over the stone was fixed a square of black cloth supported on 4 poles, which were set in sockets in the pavement. In the centre of this black cloth was sewn a golden funnel measuring 6 inches or so across at its mouth, and the sunbeams passing through this funnel fell on a bright patch, the size of an apple, upon the space of pavement that was shaded by the cloth. As the sun moved in the heavens, so did this ring of light creep across the shadow, till at length it climbed the stone of sacrifice and lay upon its edge. Then, at a sign from the head priest, his ministers laid hold of me and plucked what was left of my fine clothes from me, as cruel boys pluck a living bird, till I stood naked, except for the paint upon my body and a cloth upon my loins. Now I knew that my hour had come, and, strange to tell, For the first time this day, courage entered into me, and I rejoiced to think that soon I should have done with my tormentors. Turning to Otomie, I began to bid her farewell in a clear voice, when to my amaze I saw that as I had been served, so she was being served, for her splendid robes were torn off her, and she stood before me arrayed in nothing except her beauty, her flowing hair, and a broidered cotton smock. "Do not wonder, Teule," she said in a low voice, answering the question my tongue refused to frame. "I am your wife, and yonder is our marriage bed, the first and last. Though you do not love me, today I die your death and at your side, and I have the right to do. I could not save you, Teule, but at least I can die with you." At that moment I made no answer, for I was stricken silent by my wonder, and before I could find my tongue the priests had cast me down, and for the second time I lay upon the stone of doom. As they held me, a yell fiercer and longer than any which had gone on before told that the Spaniards had got foot on the last stair of the ascent. Scarcely had my body been set upon the centre of that great stone, when that of Otomie was laid beside it, so close that our sides touched, for I must lie in the middle of the stone, and there was no great place for her. Then the moment of sacrifice not being come, the priests made us fast with cords, which were knotted to copper rings in the pavement, and turned to watch the progress of the fray. For some minutes we lay thus side by side, and as we lay a great wonder and gratitude grew in my heart, wonder that a woman could be so brave, gratitude for the love she gave me, sealing it with her life-blood. Because Otomie loved me, she had chosen this fearful death. Because she loved me so well that she desired to die thus at my side, rather than to live on in greatness and honour without me. Of a sudden, in a moment, while I thought of this marvel, a new light shone upon my heart, and it was changed towards her. I felt that no woman could ever be so dear to me as this glorious woman, no, not even my betrothed. I felt, nay, who can say what I did feel? But I know this, that the tears rushed to my eyes and ran down my painted face, and I turned my head to look at her. She was lying as much upon her left side as her hands would allow. Her long hair fell from the stone to the paving, where it lay in masses, and her face was towards me. So close was it indeed that there was not an inch between our lips. "Otomie," I whispered, "listen to me. I love you, Otomie." Now I saw her breast heave beneath the bands, and the colour came upon her brow. "Then I am repaid," she answered, and our lips clung together in a kiss, the first, and as we thought, the last. Yes, there we kissed, on the stone of sacrifice, beneath the knife of the priest and the shadow of death, and if there had been a stranger love scene in the world, I have never heard its story. "Oh, I am repaid," she said again. "I would gladly die a score of deaths to win this moment. Indeed, I pray that I might die before you take back your words. For, Teule, I know well that there is one who is dearer to you than I am, but now your heart is softened by the faithfulness of an Indian girl, and you think that you love her. Let me die then, believing that the dream is true." "Oh, talk not so," I answered heavily, for even at that moment the memory of Lily came into my mind. You give your life for me, and I love you for it. My life is nothing, and your love is much, she answered, smiling. Ah, Teule, what magic have you that you can bring me, Montezuma's daughter, to the altar of the gods of my own free will? Well, I desire no softer bed, and for the why and wherefore it will soon be known by both of us, and with it many other things. End of chapter 21. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 22 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 22. The Triumph of the Cross. "Otomy," I said presently, "when will they kill us?" "When the point of light lies within the ring that is painted over your heart," she answered. Now I turned my head from her and looked at the sunbeam which pierced the shadow above us like a golden pencil. It rested at my side about 6 inches from me, and I reckoned it would lie in the scarlet ring painted upon my breast within some 15 minutes. Meanwhile the clamour of the battle grew louder and nearer. Shifting myself so far as the cords could allow, I strained my head upwards and saw that the Spaniards had gained the crest of the pyramid. Since the battle now raged upon its edge, and I have rarely seen so terrible a fight, for the Aztecs fought with the fury of despair, thinking little of their own lives if they could only bring a Spaniard to his death. But for the most part their rude weapons would not pierce the coats of mail, so that there remained only one way to compass their desire, namely, by casting the white men over the edge of the teocalli to be crushed like eggshells upon the pavement 200 feet below. Thus the fray broke itself upon the groups of foes who rent and tore at each other upon the brink of the pyramid, now and again to vanish down its side, 10 or 12 of them together. Some of the priests also joined the fight, thinking less of their own deaths than the desecration of their temples, for I saw one of them, a man of huge strength and stature, seize a Spanish soldier round the middle and leap with him into the space. Still, though very slowly, the Spaniards and the Tlascalans forced their way towards the centre of the platform, and as they came, the danger of this dreadful end grew less, for the Aztecs must drag them further. Now the fight drew near to the stone of sacrifice, and all who remained alive of the Aztecs, perhaps some 250 of them, besides the priests, ringed themselves round us and it in a circle. Also the outer rim of the sunbeam that fell through the gold funnel, creeping on remorselessly, touched my painted side, which it seemed to burn as hot iron might, for alas I could not command the sun to stand still while the battle raged on, as Joshua did in the valley of Ajalon. When it touched me, 5 priests seized my limbs and head, and the father of them, he who had conducted me from the palace, clasped his flint knife in both hands. Now a deathly sickness took me, and I shut my eyes, dreaming all that was done. But at that moment I heard a wild-eyed man, the chief of the astronomers whom I had noted standing by, call out to the minister of death, "Not yet, O priest of Descat! If you smite before the sunbeam lies upon the victim's heart, your gods are doomed, and doomed are the people of Anahuac." The priest gnashed his teeth with rage, and glared first at the creeping point of light and then over his shoulder at the advancing battle. Slowly the rings of warriors closed in upon us. Slowly the golden ray crept upon my breast till its outer rim touched the red circle painted upon my heart. Again the priest heaved up his awful knife. Again I shut my eyes, and again I heard the shrill scream of the astronomer, "Not yet, not yet, or your gods are doomed." Then I heard another sound. It was the voice of Otomie crying for help. "Save us, Teules, they murder us!" she shrieked in so piercing a note that it reached the ears of the Spaniards, for one shouted in answer and in Castilian tongue, "On, my comrades, on! The dogs do murder on their altars." Then there was a mighty rush, and the defending Aztecs were swept in upon the altar, lifting the priest of sacrifice from his feet and throwing him across my body. Thrice that rush came like a rush of the sea, and each time the stand of the Aztecs weakened. Now their circle was broken, and the swords of the Spaniards flashed upon every side, and now the red ray lay within the ring upon my heart. "Smite, priest of Tezcat!" screamed the voice of the astronomer. "Smite home for the glory of your gods!" With a fearful yell, the priest lifted his knife. I saw the golden sunbeam that rested full upon my heart shine upon it. Then, as it was descending, I saw the same sunbeam shine upon a yard of steel that flashed across me and lost itself in the breast of the murderer priest. Down came the great flint knife, but its aim was lost. It struck me indeed, but not upon my bosom, though I did not escape it altogether. Full upon the altar of sacrifice it fell, and was shattered there, piercing between my side and that of Otomie, and gashing the flesh of both, so that our blood was mingled upon the stone, making us one indeed. Down too came the priest upon the bodies for the second time, but to raise no more, for he writhed dying on those whom he would have slain. Then, as in a dream, I heard the wail of the astronomer singing the dirge of the gods of Anahuac. "The priest is dead and his gods are fallen," he cried. "Tezcat has rejected his victim and is fallen. Doomed are the gods of Anahuac. Victory is to the cross of the Christians." Well, thus he wailed. Then came the sound of sword blows, and I knew this prophet was dead also. Now a strong arm pulled the dying priest from off us, and he staggered back till he fell over the altar, where the eternal fire burned, quenching it with his blood and body after it had flared for so many generations, and a knife cut the rope that bound us. I sat up staring round me wildly, and a voice spoke above me in Castilian, not to me indeed, but to some comrade. "Oh, these two went near to it, poor devils," said the voice. "Had my cut not been 1 second later, that savage would have drilled a hole in him as big as my head. By all the saints, the girl is lovely, or would be if she were washed. I shall beg her of Cortes as my prize." The voice spoke, and I knew the voice. None other ever had that hard, clear ring. I knew even then, and looked up, slipping off the death stone as I looked. Now I saw. Before me, fully clad in mail, was my enemy de Garcia. It was his sword that by the good providence of God had pierced the breast of the priest. He had saved me, had he known, would as soon have turned his steel against his own heart as to that of my destroyer. I gazed at him, wondering if I dreamed. Then my lips spoke, without my will as it were. "De Garcia!" He staggered back at the sound of my voice, like a man struck by the shot, then stared at me, rubbed his eyes with his hands, and stared again. Now at length he knew me through my paint. "Mother of God!" he grasped. "It is the knave Thomas Wingfield, and I have saved his life." By this time my senses had come back to me, and knowing all my folly, I turned seeking escape. But de Garcia had no mind to suffer this. Lifting his sword, he sprang at me with a beast-like scream of rage and hate. Swiftly as thought I slipped round the stone of sacrifice, and after me came the uplifted sword of my enemy. It would have overtaken me soon enough, for I was weak with fear and fasting, and my limbs were cramped with bonds. But at that moment a cavalier, whom by his dress and port I guessed to be none other than Cortes himself, struck de Garcia's sword, saying, "How now, Sarceda? Are you mad with the lust of blood that you would take to sacrificing victims like an Indian priest? Let the poor devil go." "He is no Indian, he is an English spy," cried de Garcia, and once more struggled to get at me. "Decidedly our friend is mad," said Cortes, scanning me. "He says that this wretched creature is an Englishman. Come, be off with you, or somebody else may make the same mistake," and he waved his sword in token to us to go, deeming that I could not understand his words. Then added angrily, as de Garcia, speechless with rage, made a new attempt to get at me. "No, by heavens, I will not suffer it. We are Christians and come to save victims, not to slay them. Here, comrades, hold this fool who would stain his soul with murder." Now the Spanish clutched de Garcia by the hands and the arms, and he cursed and raved at them, for as I have said, his rage was that of a beast rather than that of a man. But I stood bewildered, not knowing whither to fly. Fortunate it was for me indeed that one was by who, though she understood no Spanish, yet had a quicker wit. For while I stood thus, Otomie clasped my hand, and whispering, "Fly, fly swiftly," led me away from the stone of sacrifice. "Whither shall we go?" I said at length. "Were it not better to trust to the mercy of the Spaniards?" "To the mercy of the man-devil with the sword," she answered. "Peace, Teule, and follow me." Now she led me on, and the Spaniards let us by unharmed, aye, and even spoke words of pity as we passed, for they knew that we were victims snatched from sacrifice. Indeed, when a certain brute, a Tlascalan Indian, rushed at us, purposing to slay us with a club, one of the Spaniards ran him through the shoulder so that he fell wounded to the pavement. So we went on, and at the edge of the pyramid we glanced back and saw that de Garcia had broken from those who held him, or perhaps he found his tongue and explained the truth to them. At the least he was bounding from the altar of sacrifice nearly 50 yards away, and coming towards us with uplifted sword. Then fear gave us strength, and we fled like the wind. Along the steep path we rushed side by side, leaping down the steps and over the hundreds of dead and dying, only pausing now and again to save ourselves from being smitten into space by the bodies of the priests whom the Spaniards were hurling from the crest of the teocalli. Once, looking up, I caught sight of de Garcia pursuing far above us, but after that we saw him no more. Doubtless he wearied of the chase, or feared to fall into the hands of such of the Aztec warriors as still clustered around the foot of the pyramid. Oh, we had lived through many dangers that day, the Princess Otomy and I, but one more waited us before we ever found shelter for a while. After we reached the foot of the pyramid and turned to mingle with the terrified rabble that surged and flowed through the courtyard of the temple, bearing away the dead and wounded as the sea at flood reclaims its waste and wreckage, a noise like thunder caught my ear. I looked up, for the sound came from above, and saw a huge mass bounding down the steep side of the pyramid. Even then I knew it again. It was the idol of the god Tezcat that the Spaniards had torn from its shrine, and like an avenging demon it rushed straight on to me. Already it was upon us. There was no retreat from instant death. We had but escaped sacrifice to the spirit of the god to be crushed to powder beneath the bulk of the marble emblem. On he came, while on high the Spaniards shouted in triumph. His base had struck the stone side of the pyramid 50 feet above us. Now he whirled round and round in the air to strike again within 3 paces of where we stood. I felt the solid mountain shake beneath the blow, and the next instant the air was filled with huge fragments of marble that whizzed over us and past us, as though a mine of powder had been blown beneath our feet, tearing the rocks from their base. The god Tezcat had burst into a score of pieces, and these fell around us like flights of arrows, and yet we were not touched. My head was grazed by his head, his feet dug a pit before my feet, but I stood there unhurt. The false god had no power over the victim who had escaped him. After that I remember nothing till I found myself once more in my apartments in Montezuma's palace, which I had never hoped to see again. Otomy was by me, and she brought me water to wash the paint from my body and the blood from my wound, which, leaving her own untended, she dressed skilfully, for the cut of the priest's knife was deep and I had bled much. Also she clothed herself afresh in a white robe and brought me raiment to wear, with food and drink, and I partook of them. Then I bade her eat something herself, and when she had done so, I gathered my wits together and spoke to her. "What next?" I said. "Presently the priests will be on us, and we shall be dragged back to sacrifice. There is no hope for me here. I must fly to the Spaniards and trust to their mercy." "To the mercy of that man with the sword? Say, Teule, who is he?" "He is that Spaniard of whom I have spoken to you, Otomy. He is my mortal enemy whom I have followed across the sea." "And now you would put yourself into his power? Truly you are foolish, Teule." "It is better to fall into the hands of Christian men than into those of your priests," I answered. "Have no fear," she said. "The priests are harmless for you. You have escaped them, and there's an end. Few have ever come alive from their clutches before, and he who does so is a wizard indeed. For the rest, I think that your god is stronger than our gods, for surely he must have cast his mantle over us when we lay yonder on the stone. Ah, Teule, to what have you brought me that I should live to doubt my gods? Aye, and to call upon the foes of my country for succour in your need? Believe me, I had not done it for my own sake, since I would have died with your kiss upon my lips and your word of love echoing in my ears, who now must live knowing that these joys have passed me." "How so?" I answered. "What I have said, I have said. Otomy, you would have died with me, and you saved my life by your wit in calling on the Spaniards. henceforth it is yours, for there is no other woman in the world so tender and so brave, and I say it again, Otomy, my wife, I love you. Our blood has mingled on the stone of sacrifice, and there we kissed. Let these be our marriage rites. Perhaps I might not have long to live, but till I die, I am yours, Otomy, my wife. Thus I spoke from the fullness of my heart, for my strength and courage were shattered. Horror and loneliness had taken hold of me. But two things were left to me in the world, my trust in Providence and the love of this woman who had dared so much for me. Therefore I forgot my troth, and clung to her as a child clings to its mother. Oh, doubtless it was wrong, but I will be bold to say that few men so placed would have acted otherwise. Moreover, I could not take back the fateful words that I had spoken on the stone of sacrifice. When I said them, I was expecting death indeed, but to renounce them now that its shadow was lifted from me, if only for a little while, would have been the act of a coward. For good or evil, I had given myself to Montezuma's daughter, and I must abide by it or be shamed. Still, such was the nobleness of this Indian lady, that even then she would not take me at my word. For a little while she stood smiling sadly, and drawing a lock of her long hair through the hollow of her hand. Then she spoke. You are not yourself, Teule, and I should be base indeed if I made so solemn a compact with one who does not know what he sells. Yonder, on the altar, and in the moment of death, you said that you loved me, and doubtless it was true. But now you have come back to life, and say, Lord, who set that golden ring upon your hand, and what is written in its circle? Yet even if these words are true that you have spoken, and you love me a little, there is one across the sea whom you love better. That I could bear, for my heart is fixed on you alone among men, and at the least you would be kind to me, and I should move in the sunlight of your presence. But having known the light, I cannot live to wander in the darkness. You do not understand. I will tell you what I fear. I fear that if we were wed, you would weary of me as men do, and that memory would grow too strong for you. Then by and by it might be possible for you to find your way back across the water to your own land and your own love, and so you would desert me, Teule. This is what I could not bear, Teule. I can forego you now, and remain your friend, but I cannot be put aside like a dancing girl, the companion of a month, Montezuma's daughter, a lady of my own land. Should you wed me, it must be for my life, Teule, and that is perhaps more than you would wish to promise. Though you could kiss me on yonder stone, and there is blood fellowship between us." And she glanced at the red stain in the linen robe that covered the wound upon her side. "And now, Teule, I leave you a while, that I may find Guatemoc, if he still lives, and others who, now that the strength of the priests is shattered, have power to protect you and advance you to honour. Think then on all that I have said, and do not be hasty to decide. Or would you make an end at once to fly to the white men if I cannot find a means of escape?" I am too weary to fly anywhere, I answered, even if I could. Moreover, I forget. My enemy is among the Spaniards, he whom I have sworn to kill. Therefore his friends are my foes, and his foes are my friends. I will not fly, Otomie. There you are wise, she said, for if you come among the Teules, that man will murder you. By fair means or foul, he will murder you within a day. I saw it in his eyes. Now rest, while I seek your safety, if there is any safety in this blood-stained land. End of chapter 22. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 23 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 23. Thomas is married. Otomie turned and went. I watched the golden curtains close behind her. Then I sank back on the couch and instantly was lost in sleep, for I was faint and weak, and so dazed with weariness that at the time I scarcely knew what happened, or the purpose of our talk. Afterwards, however, it came back to me. I must have slept for many hours, for when I awoke it was far on into the night. It was night, but not dark, for through the barred window places came the sound of tumult and fighting, and red rays of light cast by the flames of burning houses. One of these windows was above my couch, and standing on the bed I seized the sill with my hands. With much pain, because of the flesh wound in my side, I drew myself up until I could see through the bars. Then I saw that the Spaniards, not content with the capture of the teocalli, had made a night attack and set fire to hundreds of houses in the city. The glare of the flames was that of a lurid day, and by it I could see the white men retreating to their quarters, pursued by thousands of Aztecs, who hung their flanks, shooting at them with stones and arrows. Now I dropped down from the window place and began to think as to what I should do, for again my mind was wavering. Should I desert Otomie and escape to the Spaniards, if that were possible, taking my chance at the death of the hands of de Garcia? Or should I stay among the Aztecs, if they would give me shelter, and wed Otomie? There was a third choice indeed, to stay with them and leave Otomie alone, though it would be difficult to do this and keep my honour. One thing I understood: if I married Otomie, it must be at her own choice, for then I must become an Indian and give over all hope of returning to England and to my betrothed. Of this indeed there was little chance. Still, while my life remained to me, it might come about if I was free. But once my hands were tied by this marriage, it could never be during Otomie's lifetime, and so far as Lily Bozard was concerned, I should be dead. How could I be thus faithless to the memory of my troth? And on the other hand, how could I discard the woman who had risked all for me, and who, to speak truth, had grown so dear to me, though there was one yet dearer? A hero or an angel might find a path out of this tangle, but alas, I was neither the one nor the other, only a man afflicted, as other men are, with human weakness, and Otomie was at hand, and very sweet and fair. Still, almost I determined that I would avail myself of her nobleness, that I would go back upon my words and beg her to despise me and see me no more, in order that I might not be forced to break the troth that I had pledged beneath the beech at Ditchingham. For I greatly dreaded this oath of lifetime fidelity, which I should be forced to swear if I chose any other path. Thus I thought on in pitiable confusion of mind, not knowing that all these matters were beyond my ordering, since a path was already made ready to my feet, which I must follow or die. And let this be a proof of the honesty of my words, since had I been desirous of glozing the truth, I need have written nothing of these struggles of conscience and of my own weakness. For soon it was to come to this, though not by her will, that I must either wed Otomie or die at once, and few would blame me for doing the first and not the last. Indeed, though I did wed her, I might still have declared myself to my affianced and to all the world as a slave of events from which there was no escape. But it is not all the truth, since my mind was divided, and had it not been settled for me, I cannot say how the struggle would have ended. Now, looking back on the distant past, and weighing my actions and character as the judge might do, I can see, however, that had I found time to consider, there was another matter which would surely have turned the scale in favour of Otomie. De Garcia was among the Spaniards, and my hatred of de Garcia was the ruling passion of my life, a stronger passion even than my love for the two dear women who have been its joy. Indeed, though he is dead those many years, I still hate him, and evil though the desire be, even in my age I long that my vengeance was still to wreak. While I remained among the Aztecs, de Garcia would be their enemy and mine, and I might meet him in war and kill him there. But if I succeeded in reaching the Spanish camp, then it was almost sure that he would bring about my instant death. Doubtless he had told such a tale of me already that within an hour I should be hung as a spy, or otherwise made away with. But I will cease from these unprofitable wanderings, which have but one value, that of setting out my strange necessity of choice between an absent and a present love, and go on with the story of an event in which there was no room to balance scruples. While I sat musing on the couch, the curtain was drawn, and a man entered bearing a torch. It was Guatemoc, as he had come from the fray, which, except from its harvest of burning houses, was finished for the night. The plumes were shorn from his head, his golden armour was hacked by the Spanish swords, and he bled from a shot wound in the neck. "Greetings, Teule," he said. "Certainly I never thought to see you alive tonight, or myself either for that matter. But it is a strange world, and now, if never before in Tenoctitlan, those things happen for which we look the least. But I have no time for words. I come to summon you before the council." "What is to be my fate?" I asked. "To be dragged back to the stone of sacrifice? Nay, have no fear of that. But for the rest I cannot say. In an hour you may be dead, or great among us, if any of us can be called great in these days of shame. Otomie has worked well for you among the princes and the councillors, so she says, and if you have a heart, you should be grateful to her, for it seems to me that few women have loved a man so much. As for me, I have been employed elsewhere," and he glanced at his rent armour, "but I will lift up my voice for you. Now come, friend, for the torch burns low. By this time you must be well seasoned in dangers. One more or less will matter as little to you as to me." Then I rose and followed him into the great cedar-panelled hall, where that very morning I had received adoration as God. Now I was a god no longer, but a prisoner on trial for his life. Upon the dais where I had stood at the hour of my godhead were gathered those of the princes and counsellors who were left alive. Some of them, like Guatemoc, were clad in rent and bloody mail, others in their customary dress, and one in a priest's robe. They had only two things in common among them: the sternness of their faces and the greatness of their rank. And they sat there this night not to decide my fate, which was but a little thing, but to take counsel as to how they might expel the Spaniards before the city was destroyed. When I entered, a man in mail who sat in the centre of the half-circle, and in whom I knew Cuitlahua, who would be emperor should Montezuma die, looked up quickly and said, "Who is this, Guatemoc, that you bring with you?" "Ah, I remember. The Teule that was the god Tezcat, and who escaped the sacrifice today. Listen, nobles, what is to be done with this man? Say, is it lawful that he be led back to sacrifice?" Then the priest answered, "I grieve to say that it is not lawful, most noble prince. This man has lain on the altar of God. He has even been wounded by the holy knife. But the god rejected him in the fateful hour, and he must lie there no more. Slay him if you will, but not upon the stone of sacrifice." "What then shall be done with him?" said the prince again. "He is of the blood of the Teules, and therefore an enemy. One thing is certain, he must not be suffered to join the white devils and give them tidings of our distresses. Is it not best that he be put away forthwith?" Now several of the council nodded their heads, but others sat silent, making no sound. "Come," said Cuitlahua, "we have no time to waste over this man when the lives of thousands are hourly at stake. The question is, shall the Teule be slain?" Then Guatemoc rose and spoke, saying, "Your pardon, noble kinsman, but I hold that we may put this prisoner to better use than to kill him. I know him well. He is brave and loyal. As I have proved, moreover, he is not at all a Teule, but half of another race that hates them as he hates them. Also he has knowledge of their customs and mode of warfare, which we lack, and I think that he may be able to give us good counsel in our strait." "The counsel of the wolf to the deer, perhaps," said Cuitlahua coldly. "Counsel that shall lead us to the fangs of the Teules. Who shall answer for this foreign devil that he will not betray us if we trust him?" "I will answer with my life," answered Guatemoc. "Your life is of too great worth to be set of such a stake, nephew. Men of this white breed are liars, and his own word is of no value even if he gives it. I think it will be best to kill him and have done with doubts. This man is wed to Otomie, princess of the Otomie, Montezuma's daughter." "Your niece," said Guatemoc again, "and she loves him so well that she offered herself upon the stone of sacrifice with him. Unless I mistake, she will answer for him also. Shall she be summoned before you?" "If you wish, nephew, but a woman in love is a blind woman, and doubtless he has deceived her also. Moreover, she was his wife according to the rule of religion only. Is it your desire that the princess should be summoned before you, comrades?" Now some said nay, but the most, those whose interest Otomie had gained, said yea, and the end of it was that one of their number was sent to summon her. Presently she came, looking very weary, but proud in mien and royally attired, and bowed before the council. "This is the question, princess," said Cuitlahua, "whether this Teule shall be slain forthwith, or whether he shall be sworn as one of us, should he be willing to take the oath. The Prince Guatemoc here vouches for him, and he says, moreover, that you will vouch for him also. A woman can do this in one way only, by taking him she vouches as her husband. You are already wed to this foreigner by the rule of religion. Are you willing to marry him according to the custom of our land, and to answer for his faith with your own life?" "I am willing," Otomie answered quietly, "if he is willing." "In truth it is a great honour that you would do this, white dog," said Cuitlahua. "Bethink you, you are princess of the Otomie, and one of our master's daughters. It is to you that we look to bring back the mountain clans of the Otomie, of whom you are chieftainess, from their unholy alliance with the accursed Tlascalans, the slaves of the Teules. Is not your life too precious to be set on such a stake as this foreigner's faith? For learn, Otomie, if he proves false, your rank shall not help you." "I know it all," she replied quietly. "Foreigner or not, I love this man and I will answer for him with my blood. Moreover, I look to him to assist me to win back the people of the Otomie to their allegiance. But let him speak for himself, my lord. It may happen that he has no desire to take me in marriage." Cuitlahua smiled grimly and said, "When the choice lies between the breast of death and those fair arms of yours, niece, it is easy to guess his answer. Still, speak, Teule, and swiftly." "I have little to say, lord. If the Princess Otomie is willing to wed me, I am willing to wed her," I answered, and thus in the moment of my danger all my doubts and scruples vanished. As Cuitlahua had said, it was easy to guess the choice of one set between death and Otomie. She heard and looked at me warningly, saying in a low voice, "Remember our words, Teule. In such a marriage you renounce your past and give me your future." "I remember," I answered, and while I spoke, there came before my eyes a vision of Lily's face as it had been when I bade her farewell. This then was the end of the vows that I had sworn. Cuitlahua looked at me with a glance which seemed to search my heart, and said, "I hear your words, Teule. You, a white wanderer, are graciously willing to take the princess to wife, and by her to be lifted high among the great lords of this land. But say, how can we trust you? If you fail us, your wife dies indeed, but that may be naught to you." "I am ready to swear allegiance," I answered. "I hate the Spaniards, and among them is my bitterest enemy whom I followed across the sea to kill. The man strove to murder me this very day. I can say no more. If you doubt my words, it were best to make an end of me. Already I have suffered much at the hands of your people. It matters little if I die or live." "Boldly spoken, Teule. Now, lords, I ask your judgment. Shall this man be given to Otomie as husband and be sworn as one of us, or shall he be killed instantly? You know the matter. If he can be trusted, as Guatemoc and Otomie believe, he will be worth an army to us, for he is acquainted with the language, the customs, the weapons, and the modes of warfare of these white devils whom the gods have let loose upon us. If, on the other hand, he is not to be trusted, and it is hard for us to put faith in one of his blood, he may do us much injury, for in the end he will escape to the Teules and betray our counsels and our strength, or the lack of it, It is for you to judge, lords." Now the councillors consulted together, and some said one thing and some another, for they were not by any means of a mind in this matter. At length, growing weary, Cuitlahua called on them to put the question to the vote, and this they did by lifting of hands. First those who were in favour of my death held up their hands, then those who thought it wise to spare me. There were 26 councillors present, not counting Cuitlahua, and of these 13 voted for my execution, and 13 were for staying alive. "Now it seems that I must give a casting vote," said Cuitlahua, when the tale had been rendered, and my blood turned cold at his words, for I had seen that his mind was set against me. Then it was that Otomie broke in, saying, "Your pardon, uncle, but before you speak, I have a word to say. You need my services, do you not? For if the people of Otomie will listen to any and suffer themselves to be led from their evil path, it is to me. My mother was by birth their chieftainess, the last of a long line, and I am her only child. Moreover, my father is their emperor. Therefore my life is of no small worth now in this time of trouble, for though I am nothing in myself, yet it may chance that I can bring 30,000 warriors to your standard. The priests knew this on yonder pyramid, and when I claimed my right to lie at the side of the Teule, they gainsayed me, nor would they suffer it, though they hungered for the royal blood, till I called down the vengeance of the gods upon them. Now, my uncle, and you lords, I tell you this. Slay yonder man if you will, but know that then you must find another than me to lure the Otomie from their rebellion, for then I complete what I began today, and follow him to the grave." She ceased, and a murmur of amazement went round the chamber, for none had looked to find such love and courage in this lady's heart. Only Cuitlahua grew angry. "Disloyal girl," he said, "do you dare to set your lover before your country? Shame upon you, shameless daughter of our king. Why, it is in the blood. As the father is, so is the daughter. Did not Montezuma forsake his people and choose to lie among those Teules, the false children of Quetzal? And now this Otomie follows in his path. Tell us how it is, woman, that you and your lover alone escaped from the teocalli yonder when all the rest were killed. Are you then in league with these Teules? I say to you, niece, that if things were otherwise and I had my way, you would win your desire indeed, for you should be slain at this man's side and within the hour." And he ceased for lack of breath and looked upon her fiercely. But Otomie never quailed. She stood before him pale and quiet, with folded hands and downcast eyes, and answered, "Forbear to reproach me because my love is strong, or reproach me if you will. I have spoken my last word. Condemn this man to die, and Prince, you must seek some other envoy to win back the Otomie to the cause of Anahuac." Now Cuitlahua pondered, staring into the gloom above him and pulling at his beard, and the silence was great, for none knew what his judgment would be. At last he spoke. "So be it. We have need of Otomie, my niece, and it is of no avail to fight against a woman's love. Teule, we give you life, and with the life honour and wealth, and the greatest of our women in marriage, and a place on our councils. Take these gifts and her, but I say to you both, beware how you use them. If you betray us, Nay, if you do but think on treachery, I swear to you that you shall die a death so slow and horrible that the very name of it would turn your heart to water. You and your wife, your children and your servants. Come, now let him be sworn." I heard, and my head swam, and a mist gathered before my eyes. Once again I was saved from instant death. Presently it cleared, and looking up my eyes met those of the woman who had saved me, Otomy my wife, who smiled upon me somewhat sadly. Then the priest came forward bearing a wooden bowl, carved about with strange signs, and a flint knife, and bade me bare my arm. He cut my flesh with the knife, so that the blood ran from it into the bowl. Some drops of this blood he emptied on to the ground, muttering invocations the while. Then he turned and looked at Cuitlahua, as though in question, and Cuitlahua answered with a bitter laugh, "Let him be baptized with the blood of the Princess Otomy, my niece, for she is bail for him." "Nay, lord," said Guatemoc, "these two have mingled bloods already upon the stone of sacrifice, and they are man and wife. But I also have vouched for him, and I offer mine in earnest of my faith." "This Teule has good friends," said Cuitlahua. "You honour him overmuch. But so be it." Then Guatemoc came forward, and when the priest would have cut him with the knife, he laughed and said, pointing to the bullet wound upon his neck, "No need for that, priest. Blood runs here and was shed by the Teules. None can be fitter for this purpose." So the priest drew away the bandage and suffered the blood of Guatemoc to drop into a second, smaller bowl. Then he came to me, and dipping his finger into the blood, he drew the sign of a cross upon my forehead, as a Christian priest draws it upon the forehead of an infant, and said, "In the presence of the name of God our Lord, who is everywhere and sees all things, I sign you with this blood and make you of this blood. In the presence of the name of God our Lord, who is everywhere and sees all things, I pour forth your blood upon the earth." Here he poured as he spoke. "As this blood of yours sinks into the earth, so may the memory of your past life sink and be forgotten, for you are born again of the people of Anahuac. In the presence of the name of God our Lord, who is everywhere and sees all things, I mingle these bloods," and he poured from one bowl into the other, "and with them I touch your tongue." Here dipping his finger into the bowl, he touched the tip of my tongue with it, "and bid you swear thus: May every evil to which the flesh of man is subject enter into my flesh. May I live in misery and die in torment by the dreadful death. May my soul be rejected from the houses of the sun. May it wander homeless for ever in the darkness that is beyond the stars. If I depart from this my oath, I, Teule, swear to be faithful to the people of Anahuac and to their lawful governors. I swear to wage war upon their foes and to compass their destruction, and more especially upon the Teules, till they are driven into the sea. I swear to offer no affront to the gods of Anahuac. I swear myself in marriage to Otomy, princess of the Otomy, the daughter of Montezuma, my lord, for so long as her life shall endure. I swear to attempt no escape from these shores. I swear to renounce my father and my mother and the land where I was born, and to cling to this land of my new birth. And this my oath shall endure till the volcan Popo ceases to vomit smoke and fire, till there is no king in Tenoctitlan, till no priest serves the altars of the gods, and the people of Anahuac are no more a people. Do you swear these things, one and all?" One and all I swear them. I answered because I must, though there was much in the oath that I liked little enough. And yet mark how strangely things come to pass. Within 15 years from that night, the volcan Popo had ceased to vomit smoke and fire. The kings had ceased to reign in Tenochtitlan. The priests had ceased to serve the altars of the gods. The people of Anahuac were no more a people, and my vow was null and void. Yet the priests who framed this form chose these things as examples of what was immortal. When I had sworn, Guatemoc came forward and embraced me, saying, "Welcome, Teule, my brother in blood and heart. Now you are one of us, and we look to you for help and counsel. Come, be seated by me." I looked towards Cuitlahua doubtfully, but he smiled graciously and said, "Teule, your trial is over. We have accepted you, and you have sworn the solemn oath of brotherhood, to break which is to die horribly in this world, and to be tortured through eternity by demons in the next. Forget all that may have been said in the hour of your weighing, for the balance is in your favour, and be sure that if you give us cause to doubt you, you shall find none to doubt us. Now, as the husband of Otomie, you are a lord among the lords, having honour and great possessions, and as such be seated by your brother Guatemoc, and join our council." I did as he bade me, and Otomie withdrew from our presence. Then Cuitlahua spoke again, no longer of me and my matters, but of the urgent affairs of state. He spoke in slow words and weighty, and more than once his voice broke in his sorrow. He told of the grievous misfortunes that had overcome the country, of the death of hundreds of its bravest warriors, of the slaughter of the priests and soldiers that day on the teocalli, and the desecration of his nation's gods. What was to be done in this extremity, he asked. Montezuma lay dying, a prisoner in the camp of the Teules, and the fire that he had nursed with his breath devoured the land. No efforts of theirs could break the iron strength of these white devils, armed as they were with strange and terrible weapons. Day by day disaster overtook the arms of the Aztecs. What wisdom had they now that the protecting gods were shattered in their very shrines, when the altars ran red with the blood of their ministering priests, when the oracles were dumb or answered only in the accents of despair? Then one by one princes and generals arose and gave counsel according to their lights. At length all had spoken, and Cuitlahua said, looking towards me, "We have a new counsellor among us, who is skilled in the warfare and customs of the white men, who till an hour ago was himself a white man. Has he no word of comfort for us?" "Speak, my brother," said Guatemoc. Then I spoke. "Most noble Cuitlahua, and you lords and princes, you honour me by asking my counsel, and it is this in few words and brief. You waste your strength hurling your armies continually against the stone walls and the weapons of the Teules, so you shall not prevail against them. Your devices must be changed if you would win victory. The Spaniards are like other men. They are no gods as the ignorant imagine, and the creatures on which they ride are not demons but beasts of burden, such as are used for many purposes in the land where I was born. The Spaniards are men, I say, and do not men hunger and thirst? Cannot men be worn out by the want of sleep and be killed in many ways? Are not these Teules already weary to the death? Then this is my word of comfort to you. Cease to attack the Spaniards and invest their camp, so closely that no food can reach them and their allies the Tlascalans. If this is done, within 10 days from now, either they will surrender or they will strive to break their way back to the coast. But to do this, first they must win out the city, and if dikes are cut through the causeways, that will be no easy matter. Then, when they strive to escape, cumbered with the gold they covet, and came here to seek, then I say will be the hour to attack them, and to destroy them utterly." I ceased, and a murmur of applause went round the council. "It seems that we came to a wise judgment when we determined to spare this man's life," said Cuitlahua, "for all that he tells us is true, and I would that we had followed this policy from the first. Now, lords, I give my voice for acting as our brother points the way. What say you?" "We say with you that your brother's words are good," answered Guatemoc presently, "and now let us follow them to the end." Then, after some further talk, the council broke up, and I sought my chamber well nigh blind with weariness and crushed by the weight of all that I had suffered on that eventful day. The dawn was flaring in the eastern sky, and by its glimmer I found my path down the empty corridors, till at length I came to the curtains of my sleeping place. I drew them and passed through. There, far up the room, the faint light gleaming on her snowy dress, her raven hair and ornaments of gold, stood Otomie, my bride. I went towards her, and as I came she glided to meet me with outstretched arms. Presently they were about my neck, and her kiss was on my brow. "Now all is done, my love and lord," she whispered, "and come good or ill, or both, we are one till death, for such vows as ours cannot be broken. All is done indeed, Otomie, and our oaths are lifelong, though other oaths have been broken, that they might be sworn," I answered. Thus then I, Thomas Wingfield, was wed to Otomie, Princess of the Otomie, Montezuma's daughter. End of chapter 23. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 24 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 24. The Night of Fear. Long before I awoke that day, the commands of the council had been carried out, and the bridges in the great causeways were broken down wherever dikes crossed the raised road that ran through the waters of the lake. That afternoon also I went dressed as an Indian warrior with Guatemoc and the other generals, to a parley which was held with Cortes, who took his stand on the same tower of the palace that Montezuma had stood on when the arrow of Guatemoc struck him down. There is little to be said of this parley, and I remember it chiefly because it was when for the first time since I had left the Tobascans that I saw Marina close, and heard her sweet and gentle voice. For now as ever she was by the side of Cortes, translating his proposals of peace to the Aztecs. Among those proposals was one which showed me that de Garcia had not been idle. It asked that the false white man who had been rescued from the altars of the gods upon the teocalli should be given in exchange for certain Aztec prisoners, in order that he might be hung according to his merits as a spy and deserter, a traitor to the Emperor of Spain. I wondered as I heard, if Marina knew when she spoke the words, that the false white man was none other than the friend of her Tabascan days. "You see that you are fortunate in having found place among us Aztecs, Teule," said Guatemoc with a laugh, "for your own people would greet you with a rope." Then he answered Cortes, saying nothing of me, but bidding him and all the Spanish prepare for death. "Many of us have perished," he said. "You must also perish, Teules. You shall perish of hunger and thirst. You shall perish on the altars of the gods. There is no escape for you, Teules. The bridges are broken." And all the multitude took up the words and thundered out, "There is no escape for you, Teules. The bridges are broken." Then the shooting of arrows began, and I sought the palace to tell Otomie my wife what I had gathered of the state of her father Montezuma, who the Spaniards said still lay dying, and of her two sisters who were hostages in the quarters. Also I told her about my surrender had been sought, and she kissed me, and said smiling that though my life was now burdened with her, still it was better so than I should fall into the hands of the Spaniards. 2 days later came the news of Montezuma was dead, and shortly after it his body, which the Spaniards handed over to the Aztecs for burial, attired in the gorgeous robes of royalty. They laid it in the hall of the palace, whence it was hurried secretly and at night to Chapultepec, and there hidden away with small ceremony, for it was feared that the people might rend it limb from limb in their rage. With Otomie weeping at my side, I looked for the last time on the face of that most unhappy king, whose reign so glorious in its beginning had ended thus. And while I looked, I wondered what suffering could have equalled his, as fallen from his estate and hated by the subjects whom he had betrayed, he lay dying, a prisoner in the power of the foreign wolves who were tearing out his country's heart. It is little wonder indeed that Montezuma rent the bandages from his wounds, and would not suffer them to tend his hurts, for the real hurt was in his soul. There the iron had entered deeply, and no leech could cure it except one called death. And yet the fault was not all his. The devils whom he worshipped as gods were revenged upon him, for they had filled him with the superstitions of their wicked faith, and because of these gods and their high priest must sink into common ruin. Were it not for these unsubstantial terrors that haunted him, the Spaniards had never won the foothold in Tenochtitlan, and the Aztecs would have remained free for many a year to come. But Providence willed it otherwise, and this dead and disgraced monarch was but its instrument. Oh, such were the thoughts that passed through my mind as I gazed upon the body of the great Montezuma. But Otomie, ceasing from her tears, kissed his clay and cried out aloud, "O my father, it is well that you are dead, for none who loved you could have desired to see you live on in shame and servitude. May the gods you worship give me strength to avenge you, or if they be no gods, then may I find it in myself. I swear this, my father, that while a man is left to me I will not cease from seeking to avenge you." Then taking my hand, without another word she turned and passed thence. As will be seen, she kept her oath. On that day and on the morrow there was fighting with the Spaniards, who sallied out to fill up the gaps in the dykes of the causeway, a task in which they succeeded, though with some loss. But it availed them nothing, for so soon as their backs were turned, we opened the dykes again. It was on these days that for the first time I had experience of war, and armed with my bow, made after the English pattern, I did good service. As it chanced, the very first arrow that I drew was on my hated foe de Garcia. But here my common fortune pursued me, for being out of practice or over anxious, I aimed too high, though the mark was an easy one, and the shaft pierced the iron of his casque, causing him to reel in his saddle, but doing him no further hurt. Still this marksmanship, poor as it was, gave me great renown among the Aztecs, who were but feeble archers, for they had never before seen an arrow pierce through the armour of the Spanish mail. Nor would mine have done so had I not collected the iron barbs of the crossbow bolts of the Spaniards, and fitted them onto my own shafts. I seldom found the mail that would withstand arrows made thus, when the range was short and the aim good. After the first day's fight I was appointed general over the body of 3,000 archers, and was given a banner to be borne before me, and a gorgeous captain's dress to wear. But what pleased me better was a chain shirt which came from the body of a Spanish cavalier. For many years I always wore this shirt beneath my cotton mail, and it saved my life more than once, for even bullets would not pierce the two of them. I had taken over the command of my archers but 48 hours, a scant time in which to teach them discipline, whereof they had little, though they were brave enough, when the occasion came to use them in good earnest, and with it the night of disaster, that is still known among the Spaniards as Noche Triste. On the afternoon before the night of a council was held in the palace at which I spoke, saying I was certain that the Teules thought of retreat from the city, and in the dark, for otherwise they would not have been so eager to fill up the canals in the causeway. To this Cuitlahua, who now that Montezuma was dead would be emperor, though he was not yet chosen and crowned, answered that it might be well that the Teules meditated flight, but that they could never attempt it in the darkness, since in so doing they must become entangled in the streets and dykes. I replied that though it was not the Aztec habit to march and fight at night, such things were common enough among white men, as they had seen already, and that because the Spaniards knew it was not their habit, they would be more likely to attempt escape under the cover of darkness, when they thought their enemies were asleep. Therefore I counselled that sentries should be set on the entrances of every causeway. To this Cuitlahua assented, and assigned the causeway of Tlacopan to Guatemoc and myself, making us the guardians of its safety. That night Guatemoc and I, with some soldiers, went out towards midnight to visit the guards that we placed upon the causeway. It was very dark, and a fine rain fell, so that a man could see no further before his eyes than he can at evening through a Norfolk roke in autumn. We found and relieved the guard, which reported that all was quiet, and we were returning towards the great square, when of a sudden I heard a dull sound as of thousands of men tramping. "Listen," I said. "It is the Teules who escape," whispered Guatemoc. Quickly we ran to where the street from the great squares opened onto the causeway, and there, even through the darkness and rain, we caught the gleam of armour. Then I cried in a great voice, "To arms! To arms! The Teules escape by the causeway of Tlacopan!" Instantly my words were caught by the sentries and passed from post to post till the city rang with them. They were cried in every street and canal, they echoed from the roofs of the houses and among the summits of 100 temples. The city awoke with a murmur. From the lake came the sound of water beaten by 10,000 oars, as though myriads of wildfowl had sprung suddenly from their reedy beds. Here, there, and everywhere, torches flashed out like falling stars. Wild notes were blown on horns and shells, and above all arose the booming of the snake-skin drum, which the priest upon the teocalli beat furiously. Presently the murmur grew to a roar, and from this direction and from that armed men poured towards the causeway of Tlacopan. Some came on foot, but the most of them were in canoes which covered the waters of the lake further than the ear could hear. Now the Spaniards, to the number of 1,500 or so, accompanied by 6,000 or 8,000 Tlascalans, were emerging on the causeway in a long thin line. Guatemoc and I rushed before them, collecting men as we went, till we came to the first canal, where canoes were already gathering by scores. The head of the Spanish column reached the canal, and the fight began, which, so far as the Aztecs were concerned, was a fray without plan or order, for in that darkness and confusion the captains could not see their men, or the men hear their captains. But they were there in countless numbers, and had only one desire in their breast, to kill the Teules. A cannon roared, sending a storm of bullets through us, and by its flash we saw that the Spaniards carried a timber bridge with them, which they were placing across the canal. Then we fell on them, every man fighting for himself. Guatemoc and I were swept over the bridge by the first rush of the enemy, as leaves are swept in a gale, and though both of us won through safely, we saw each other no more that night. With us and after us came the long array of Spaniards and Tlascalans, and from every side the Aztecs poured upon them, clinging to their struggling line as ants cling to a wounded worm. How can I tell all that came that night? I cannot, for I saw but little of it. All I know is that for 2 hours I was fighting like a madman. The foe crossed the first canal, but when all were over the bridge was sunk so deep in the mud that it could not be stirred, and 3 furlongs on ran a second canal deeper and wider than the first. Over this they could not cross till it was bridged with the dead. It seemed as though all hell had broken loose upon the narrow bridge of ground. The sound of cannons and of arquebuses, and shrieks of agony and fear, the shouts of the Spanish soldiers, the war cries of the Aztecs, the screams of the wounded horses, the wail of women, the hiss of hurtling darts and arrows, and the dull noise of falling blows, went up to heaven in one hideous hurly-burly. Like a frightened mob of cattle, the long Spanish array swayed this way and that, bellowing as it swayed. Many rolled down the sides of the causeways to be slaughtered in the water of the lake, or borne away to sacrifice in the canoes. Many were drowned in the canals, and yet more were trampled to death in the mud. Hundreds of the Aztecs perished also, for the most part beneath the weapons of their own friends, who struck and shot, not knowing on whom the blow would fall, or in whose breast the arrow would find its home. For my part, I fought on with a little band of men who had gathered about me, till at last the dawn broke and showed an awful sight. The most of those who were left alive of the Spaniards and their allies had crossed the second canal upon a bridge made of dead bodies of their fellows, mixed up with a wreck of baggage, cannon, and packages of treasure. Now the fight was raging beyond it. A mob of Spaniards and Tlascalans were still crossing the second breach, and on these I fell with such men as were with me. I plunged right into the heart of them, and suddenly before me I saw the face of de Garcia. With a shout I rushed at him. He heard my voice and knew me. With an oath he struck at my head. The heavy sword came down upon my helmet of painted wood, shearing away one side of it and felling me. But ere I fell, I smote him on the breast with the club I carried, tumbled him to the earth. Now half stunned and blinded, I crept towards him through the press. All that I could see was a gleam of armour in the mud. I threw myself upon it, gripping at the wearer's throat, and together we rolled down the side of the causeway into the shallow water at the edge of the lake. I was uppermost, and with a fierce joy I dashed the blood from my eyes that I might see to kill my enemy caught at last. His body was in the lake, but his head lay upon the sloping bank, and my plan was to hold him beneath the water till he was drowned, for I had lost my club. "At length, de Garcia!" I cried in Spanish as I shifted my grip. "For the love of God, let me go!" grasped a rough voice beneath me. "Fool, I am no Indian dog." Now I peered into the man's face bewildered. I had seized de Garcia, but the voice was not his voice, nor was the face his face, but that of a rough Spanish soldier. "Who are you?" I asked, slackening my hold. "Where is de Garcia, he whom you name Sarceda?" "Sarceda? I don't know. A minute ago he was on his back on the causeway. The fellow pulled me down and rolled behind me. Let me be, I say. I am not Sarceda, and if I were, is this a time to settle private quarrels? I am your comrade, Bernal Diaz. Holy Mother, who are you? An Aztec who speaks Castilian?" "I am no Aztec," I answered. "I am an Englishman, and I fight with the Aztecs that I may slay him whom you name Sarceda. But with you I have no quarrel, Bernal Diaz. Be gone and escape if you can. No, I will keep the sword with your leave." "Englishman, Spaniard, Aztec or devil," grunted the man as he drew himself from the bed of ooze, "you are a good fellow, and I promise you that if I live through this, and it should ever come about that I get you by the throat, I will remember the turn you did me. Farewell." And without more ado he rushed up the bank and plunged into a knot of his flying countrymen, leaving his good sword in my hand. I strove to follow him that I might find my enemy, who once more had escaped me by craft, but my strength failed me, for de Garcia's sword had bitten deep and I had bled much. So I must sit where I was till a canoe came and bore me back to Otomie to be nursed, and 10 days went by before I could walk again. This was my share of the victory of the Noche Triste. Alas, it was a barren triumph, though more than 500 of the Spaniards were slain and thousands of their allies. For there was no warlike skill or discipline among the Aztecs, and instead of following the Spaniards till not one of them remained alive, they stayed to plunder the dead and drag away the living to sacrifice. Also this day of revenge was a sad one to Otomie, seeing that 2 of her brothers, Montezuma's sons, whom the Spaniards held in hostage, perished with them in the fray. As for de Garcia, I could not learn what had become of him, nor whether he was living or dead. End of chapter 24. Recording by Patrick 79.